Welcome to The Women's Wisdom, our journey in emergency medicine podcast, a production of the Women in Emergency Medicine section of the American Academy of Emergency Medicine. Join Doctors Molly Estes and Liz Calhoun as they are joined by prominent women in emergency medicine and other special guests.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Women's Wisdom podcast. My name is Liz Calhoun, and I am an attending physician at Mercy Fitzgerald Hospital in Darby, Pennsylvania. And today I am happy to welcome a special guest on our podcast, Dr. Jane Wieler.
Hello, I'm Jane Wieler. I currently work as a staff physician and technically assistant department director of a small community emergency department in Nashua, New Hampshire. So we are about an hour outside of Boston and a very small community center that sees about 24,000 visits per year, but it's solo coverage.
You are a much braver woman than I am. So full disclosure here, Jane might have gotten voluntold for this podcast because we were co-residents together. And one of my favorite things about Jane is she took a lot of really crazy circumstances and made a lot of wonderful things out of the chaos in her life, and now translates that chaos into wonderful things as an attending and as a mom.
Yeah. I think our journey has been really special and interesting and unfortunate in some ways with the closure of Hahnemann at the end of our second year of residency, and has really shaped a lot of our co-residents and our career paths. Luckily, I went to Thomas Jefferson to finish out my third year of residency, which was an amazing and very supportive environment and overall a positive experience. But I think going into residency and in my first 2 years, I really thought I would go more into academics. And it's just interesting. I've ended up in a really small community setting, and I don't really think I'll go into academia at all.
It's crazy how our paths change in ways we don't expect. We talk a lot about happy accidents on this podcast, and it sounds like this was one for you, but very unexpected.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I had anticipated that my husband and I would settle like somewhere close to a major city where I could have a, relatively short commute, maybe half an hour, 40 minutes or so, and work with either medical students or residents. And I mean, I'm an hour outside of Boston, but that commute is totally prohibitive for me. It's not going to happen ever. And so, yeah, when we started job searching, it just ended up being small community or small community, and yeah.
You jumped headlong to something that still scares me, and I do it for far less hours a day than you do, that single coverage job, and you did it right out of residency. What wisdom can you offer to somebody who's considering a job like this? What do you wish you'd known before you took your current position?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that I felt prepared for that because of our second year at Hahnemann, which is really like our entire year was at a community hospital. And we really had to fly on our own a lot. And then third year was also really challenging. I felt like with the whole new system, new computer system, new attendings, everything was so challenging every day that, you just have to push through and overcome it. So I felt a bit more confident going to solo practice. What it really came down to was the chair of the department was incredibly supportive. So when I was interviewing, he said he had a whole plan for me starting out and a transition where he would be working administratively during my clinical shifts. So just in case I had any questions in my first 2 weeks of shift work, that he would be like physically available close by. He could run to the ED and answer any issues I had. And then also for my night shifts, he said, call me 24/7, text me 24/7. I will absolutely be there. And it made it a really smooth transition. I think having supportive people around you is really important. So that's crucial to determine in your interview. And then knowing that I just a phone call away, I could call the attendings at Mercy Hospital in in Darby in Mercy Fitzgerald or Mercy and call them at any point, and whoever was working at that time would answer and help me out.
That is so true. And it's not just because I'm there. I wasn't there then.
Yeah.
But that's a great piece of advice for residents too, is think about where you are now. Medical students, when you're looking for residency programs, are you with people that you can call at 3 a.m. for advice?
Yeah. I think that I luckily had 2 months of rotations in my third year where I went back to those community sites. And I remember every once in a while the attendings, telling me, remember when you graduate, you can always call us. Like whoever's on will be happy to help you through anything. So I think definitely I agree. Medical students looking at some of the faculty as you're interviewing, would you be comfortable calling them when you're graduating, when you're out on your own? Having a built-in support system was crucial. I don't think I ever called, but knowing I could call was essential.
100%. And I definitely felt that way too. I never called as an attending, but I called as a resident to our home hospital. I was an adult patient at a children's hospital, and I was the most qualified person to take care of them, which is scary. And I called for backup.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
also nice to have your co-residents as your backup support system too. How do you handle not having that support system on a solo covered shift?
Yeah, I think my first year and a half as an attending was really challenging because we also oversee physician assistants, and I didn't actually have any experience with that in residency at all. So that was a really steep learning curve, and I was very uncomfortable co-signing their charts, even though I was physically in the same location as all the patients. We have such a volume that I can't physically see every patient. And um, going through chart review, I'd caught some things that I would then call the patient to go back to the ED because the workup was inadequate, in my opinion. And unfortunately, that had not been discussed with me before the patient was discharged because, per our policy, they can discharge without notifying us about the patient at all. If it's an admission, that has to be discussed. It's very strange. I would definitely ask about nuances with overseeing PAs or NPs before you start any job, because it's extremely steep learning curve and can be very uncomfortable. I think, yeah, it's just tough and you work through it.
Yeah, but scope of practice and how you handle that as an attending physician is not something we talk enough about in residency. But if you're listening to this podcast, you know what AEM's stance on this is. So, and if you don't,
Yes.
check it out. We have lots of resources for you.
Yes.
But
Yes.
just overseeing a few PAs or NPs can make your shift total chaos. And then you get home and you have even more chaos.
Yeah. So currently, I have a 4-month-old little boy, and I also have a rambunctious 2-year-old girl. And so life is pretty loud and wild right now.
And yet we're sitting here at Scientific Assembly. So clearly you've managed to tame it a little bit and have enough time to be away from your 4-month-old. Let's all give Jane a round of applause for being able to be yourself as well as being a mom.
Yeah, I think that that's been challenging as well, but I think it's really informed my patient care. I think my outlook and probably not my demeanor or my interactions toward my patients, but I'm just a lot more empathetic. And it's just kind of changed how I approach things, which is good. I think it's been in a very positive way. But it's a little tricky to balance. And luckily, my parents are at home with the kids right now, but I currently am breastfeeding. So it's a little tricky to work in, even at the assembly, to, okay, now I have to pump. All right, now I have to pump, and running back and forth. It's just a lot of logistics. We luckily have a nanny who's fantastic and loves our kids. And that has been so wonderful because of our crazy schedules. I rotate day, evening, and overnight. So she rolls with the ball. I do her schedule for a full month. And so she's pretty happy with that. But we had a long discussion about how many hours do we guarantee her? Usually she works about 26 hours per week, which isn't that many. But occasionally she works over, and we pay her for 30 hours no matter what. So that keeps her happy. My husband was like, should we have a part-time nanny? And I said, absolutely not. We will just pay her for full-time hours, whether she works them or not, because I want to keep her. And so it's this whole, balance of risks and benefits
It's
of,
an
how much do you want to pay versus how much legwork do you want to do to find somebody new?
it's an important conversation, and one that I think we have for ourselves as physicians too. What is your value? How much is your time worth? And are you being compensated appropriately? And
Yeah.
it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing to get someone who is understanding
Yes.
of the crazy lifestyle that we all live.
Yes.
Your husband's a physician too, but his schedule is nothing like ours.
Yeah, he's an orthopedic surgeon and he works Monday to Friday. And luckily, our nanny will come occasionally on a Saturday or Sunday for like 5 to maybe 6 hours one of those days to help, which is really that was crucial when we were hiring her.
This is such an important conversation because a lot of times we talk about our jobs and we talk about our career trajectories, but we don't talk about our family trajectories and how our unique lifestyle fits into our careers.
And I've been thinking a lot lately. It must be the postpartum hormones and the breastfeeding and everything, but I just came from a big family and I would love to have a big family, but I remember it being chaos as a kid, and it feels like with two kids right now when I get home, there's a lot of chaos. I get home, it's like immediately, mommy, 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 and like everybody is on me, and the needs are so great. And I would love to have another child, but I've really been debating, like, it feels like a lot of chaos at work, which we all manage. And then I get home and it's a totally different type of chaos, but it's still there and it's still really hectic and busy and energetic. And kind of meshing those together and figuring out, like, how do I have me time to keep myself healthy and balanced? And how do I navigate my 2 year old's emotional crazy swings and tantrums and try to be a calming and, supportive presence for her is really tough when she does something and I want to scream too. We're both like, or like she's crying and I want to cry. And then I'm like, oh my God, I want a third, but I can't have a third. Like, this is too much.
So, how do you find your balance in that? Do you ever just say, you know what, screw it, I'm going to cry too?
I have actually in the whole 4 months since having 2 kids, I've only done that once, but yes, it was very, like, overwhelming. I think it was, like, I was very tired. My son was 2 months old, and he was hungry. He had just woken up from a nap. He was hungry. My daughter just woke up from a nap. She was trying to climb out of her crib, and I was like, "No, no, wait. I'll put him down on the floor where it's safe so he can't roll off, right?" So I like did a 90-degree turn to put him on the floor. And she somehow flies out of her crib, smashes her head on the ground, and then starts wailing. And so he's crying really loud because he's hungry. She's wailing. She flopped out of her crib. So I just sat on the floor. I was like, we're just all gonna cry right now. And this is just happening. It's just like, and it's just like a thing.
Was it
Yeah.
the most cathartic moment
Yeah.
ever?
Yeah, yeah, it was a great release, actually. But it was just so funny. It's like so classic. Like, just everybody's crying. I was like, well, there's nothing else I can do, so I'm gonna cry too.
I think that is such a hard thing to learn is like
Like, oh my
sometimes you just
God.
have to let your emotions out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I try to regulate myself to try to like regulate my toddler. And that's also really hard to do, really challenging. Yeah.
It's definitely challenging to be a mom and a nearly full-time physician
Yeah.
and have wear multiple hats at work. We haven't even
Yeah.
touched on your other roles.
Yeah, but I work like 0.76 full-time equivalents clinically, and then, yeah, I do the assistant department stuff on top, so,
So,
yeah.
what wisdom do you have for us on how to balance this? What would you tell somebody who's considering becoming a mom
Yeah,
and managing it to do it all like you
yeah.
do?
I would say go for it. There's never a good time to have kids at all. I am glad that I waited until after residency, but that's partly because we had so much turmoil at the end of ours. But I think if I had children like during residency or something, I would need my in-laws or my parents to be really close by so that they could help with the childcare, even beyond like regular nanny hours, or get an au pair, like a live-in nanny. I think having a lot of childcare resources is crucial, and not being afraid to use them. I'm planning in the next few months scheduling my nanny for more and more hours every week so that I can dedicate more like time to going into the office to do my admin work instead of doing it late at night like I have been recently. So I'm planning on adjusting. I noticed that I was working from like 8 to 10 p.m. And why am I working at night? I need to do this during the daytime when I can truly focus. So don't be afraid to change things up and get a really good nanny or some kind of help and pay for it. It is worth every dollar when you find someone good.
Well, it sounds like you've really found a great work-life balance, and
Mhm.
thank you for
So far.
sharing.
I don't know. It's going to change. You interview me again next year, it'll be different.
But isn't that the point? I mean, who better to learn to roll with the punches than an EM physician, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing your story with us, Jane. We really
Yeah,
appreciate you
my
talking
pleasure.
about these topics, which are so hard for us to talk about otherwise.
Yeah, I think the like child, having children and that decision and everything, it's individual, but yeah, there's no good time. It needs to be talked about more.
And on that note, we'll talk more about it on another episode of the Women's Wisdom Podcast. Thanks for joining us.
We hope you have enjoyed this podcast from the American Academy of Emergency Medicine. AAEM is a nonprofit professional association of over 8,000 emergency physicians dedicated to board certification and democratic group practice. For more information about AAEM, visit our website at www.aaem.org.